Hello, I'm Rick Robinson, Artistic Director of and Composer for Cut Time Symphonica. It is my great pleasure to introduce the musical guests of this ProMusica Detroit program, pianist Pauline Martin and violinist Eliot Heaton. Both are remarkably inspirational colleagues who understand how to draw greater contrast, comfort, mystery, and resolution from even the most well-trodden classical music. Pauline Martin, the Canadian-born Steinway concert artist, has won glorious reviews from the Washington Post and other critics. She's been presented as soloist with numerous orchestras in Canada and the United States, and has recorded for the Naxos, Koch, and CRS labels. And as a member of the former Sinclair Trio, and now leading the Chamber Soloists of Detroit, Pauline has stabilized the presence of piano chamber music around Metro Detroit for longer than I can remember. I've had the great pleasure of playing the Brahms' first cello sonata with her decades ago, and I consider it the highlight of my solo career. Pauline earned 2 degrees at Indiana University, studying with the legendary Menachem Kreisler, and at the University of Michigan with Theodore Letvin, Gary Grafman, and Andre Watts. Today, she's working constantly with our featured violinist, whom Pauline has adopted into the Chamber Soloists of Detroit, where they have formed the rare chemistry you are about to delight in. That violinist, Eliot Heaton, is a musician's musician. He came to Detroit assuming the position of concertmaster of the Michigan Opera Theater in 2015, and quickly began assuming top positions in many other ensembles of substance in the region and beyond. The Saginaw Bay Symphony, Des Moines Metro Opera, New Music Detroit, and naturally both Cut Time ensembles. Also a graduate of Indiana University, as well as the Oberlin Conservatory, Eliot studied with Kevork Martirosyan and Marilyn McDonald, respectively. What's more is that Eliot earned concurrent degrees in history and jazz performance as well. I think you'll find that Eliot brings all this knowledge, feeling, and expression to bear, with highly contrasting colors, dramatic power, and august phrasing far beyond his youthful appearance. Please enjoy these performances from the Steinway Piano Gallery, interspersed with interviews with WRCJ 90.9 FM celebrity host Cecelia Sharpe. And please share the link after watching with your recommendation on social media. And now, here's Cecelia Sharpe.
Thank you so much, Rick. It's so good to be back for the second season of ProMusica Detroit Live. We definitely missed you over the time that we were gone, but we were preparing a great season for you. And I'm so glad that we have violinist Eliot Heaton here to kick off this first episode of the second season. Welcome, Eliot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and for bringing this program to this first episode. We're excited to have you. Well, before we jump into the music, Eliot, I wanted to talk about how you got started in music. How did your musical journey begin?
Well, I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and all of my older brothers and sisters played string instruments. Our mom is a pianist, and she made sure that we all had very good teachers and that we all practiced more than we probably would have otherwise. So I got started playing when I was about 3 years old. There was a very good Suzuki school in Ithaca, New York. And they used to send teachers to my hometown, Geneva, New York, once a week. And so I would have weekly lessons in the Suzuki system. And I just kind of kept on going all the way until now.
And it continues. Did you play with your siblings? Was there a quintet or a trio?
Yeah, so there's we collectively, I'm the only one who's playing, as my full-time job, but they're all still very good players, and we form a cello quintet. So there's 2 cellists, a violist, and 2 violinists. So we can play the Schubert cello quintet, if we all get together and happen to have all our instruments in one place.
That's a healthy group right there. Your mom knew what she was doing. Thanks, yeah. Mrs. Heaton.
And yeah, and we still all play. I still play frequently with my mom. One of these pieces that we're playing on the program today was one that I had studied in high school, and my mom used to accompany my piano or my violin lessons in high school. She would play the piano during the lesson, and I tried to give Pauline the part because of the music, and it had like every note had some instructions written only for the violin part, no instructions written for the piano part, but so she could really see like where I was doing it right and where I was doing it wrong.
Right, right. That is incredible, even to have that music still and to be able to share it with Pauline, and that you can still play with your mom and get together in that way, a whole different bond.
Yeah.
So as a professional musician, you're a solo artist, you're in multiple ensembles, you're an instructor, a private instructor. Who inspires you at this stage in your life?
Well, I just love listening to good music. So someone told me when I was in school, they said, because we would have to go to recitals all the time in studio class and technique class, and hear all kinds of people play all kinds of things. And they said there's something to learn from every performance. There's something that everyone is doing that is unique to them, and that you can try to incorporate into your own playing. So anytime I see something I like, I try to figure out like what is it that I like about this, and how can I try to put that into my own playing. I'm also very lucky to live with just one of the best violinists that I know, who's my wife. So it's hard to be lazy when you hear someone playing incredibly well one room over. You're not going to want to sit on the couch playing video games for too long.
Wow. So it's still in the household, from your siblings and your mother into marrying a violinist. That
Yes.
is so awesome. So you're always supporting each other and encouraging each other.
Yeah. In one way or another. Yeah. We're always, and when we're not, and at least we're hearing each other play, and we can see what engagements we're going to, and sometimes we get to play together. So, and that's really nice. And yeah, growing up, I'm just used to being in a place with a lot of musicians who I look up to. So I would always see my older brothers and sisters practicing things that were way more advanced than whatever I was doing. And of course, those are the people I wanted to be like when I was a kid. And so it just kind of, I guess I stuck with that model for the long haul here.
Well, Eliot, I think we've had a good talk about how you got started, and I know that the audience is eagerly awaiting to hear you perform. Why don't you tell us the first piece that you're going to perform for us today?
So we're going to open with one of our favorite pieces of Fritz Kreisler, La Gitana. And Kreisler is just one of my favorite violinists of all time, and also funnily, one of my favorite composers. Actually, he wrote a lot of smaller sort of salon style pieces like the one that we're about to play, that are just like a really strong musical character that doesn't go on for too long and highlights something wonderful about the violin. So like, what more could you ask for as a violinist? So, and Kreisler, related to this program, was someone who was able to hear musical styles that he liked and incorporate them into his own compositions in a really, I think, successful way. And we're going to play this piece, which is imitates folk sort of improvisatory style and a rhythmic dance style. And later on, we're going to play another piece that imitates more like Scott Joplin. And these are both just kinds of music that he heard and decided that he wanted to participate in, and then wrote some for himself to play. So I hope that you guys like this piece. And if it doesn't leave you fully convinced, there is a great recording of the Fritz Kreisler himself performing it. So you can check that out if this doesn't do it for you.
Eliot, I'm sure that they are going to be more than convinced. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, violinist Eliot Heaton, pianist Pauline Martin performing Fritz Kreisler's La Gitana. Ladies and gentlemen, that was violinist Eliot Heaton and pianist Pauline Martin performing La Gitana, composed by Fritz Kreisler. What an amazing performance, Eliot.
Thanks.
We're so glad to have you once again. And if you're just tuning in, welcome to the first episode of the second season of ProMusica Detroit. live here online. So happy to have you here. Eliot, you are a very, very busy artist. You're a solo artist. You perform in many ensembles. You're the concert master in some of these ensembles. You instruct students. How do you manage your musical career as a solo artist and as an ensemble musician?
Well, Google Calendar is very helpful. That was the first real thing I had to figure out, is like how to keep track of my schedule and make sure I have enough time to practice everything so that I would feel good about all of my performances and teaching. And I think as far as doing different kinds of playing, I find it really helpful. I think doing too much of any one thing can sort of narrow my focus a little too much, to the detriment. If I'm doing too much my own personal practice, maybe I'm not as sensitive in the ensemble. And if I'm teaching too much, maybe I'm not practicing as much. And if I'm playing in the ensemble too much, I'm listening to others, and then my own playing maybe becomes a little bit less sharp. So I like to keep those three that you mentioned going as much as I can, playing solo repertoire, ensemble playing, and also teaching. I think they all have a lot of positive things to contribute to my understanding of music, but only when I have a good balance of all three of them.
What advice do you have for any students who are listening or growing in their career as artists, on how to get started? Would you recommend focusing on the solo part or the orchestral part? I know you said that you have a healthy balance of it, but as a young person, how do you recommend balancing that?
Well, speaking from my own experience, as a young person, and particularly as a teenager, I was just assumed that I was going to be a soloist. And this is the way that a lot of music education is done. You know, you learn a lot of concertos. You don't spend a lot of time in your lessons learning orchestral parts or learning violin parts to string quartets. You work on the solo repertoire, you work on your solo Bach and your concerto to kind of develop your own musical personality. And I think that's a good thing. And you can find out who you really are, but not many people are going to end up as full-time soloists. And I think it's really helpful just to find music that you like to listen to, and then find some way to participate in that. And I went as a kid to Greenwood Music Camp, where they had a singing choir, and we played in orchestra, and primarily we would play in small chamber music groups. And that was really eye-opening to me, as you know, thinking I was some great soloist because I could play the Lalo Symphony Espanol. It was just seeing other kids my age who were also really serious about it, who wanted to do it, and then to be able to play, like, you know, Beethoven quartets or a Brahms trio with other people your age who are you know, very good players. That really sparked my energy. You know, that made me think this is something that is worth doing well, and it's worth practicing for my lesson, even if, you know, you want to complain about it. Like finding a way that you enjoy it, I think.
Enjoying the sometimes not so fun stuff of music, like practicing. Well, we have a full program, Eliot, so let's get back into some music. What is the second work that we're going to hear from you and Pauline?
So we're going to play the Ravel Sonata for violin and piano. So Ravel wrote this piece. It took him actually 4 years to write. He apparently saw violin and piano as somewhat incompatible instruments in terms of the sounds that they made, and I think did some really interesting things as a result of that. So the piece is in 3 movements, and we chose to include it on this program, particularly because of the middle movement, which he calls a blues. Of course, it's blues through the lens of Ravel. So it doesn't sound like maybe what we're going to play later in the program or what we would think of as an American audience as blues, but it's really interesting that he was a big fan of jazz at the time, and just 1 year after he published this piece, he would take a tour of the United States, and he really wanted to. He went to New Orleans. He wanted to see all the great jazz halls, and he thought that was the really strong suit of American music. So we wanted to include it because of that, but the whole piece, including the outer 2 movements, is really wonderful. Like I said, the instruments are treated in a not as blending of a way as what we would hear in maybe a Brahms sonata, or even some of these sort of show pieces that we're doing in the rest of the program, where the piano is playing chords and the violin is playing a melody on the top. You'll hear right in the beginning of the first movement, the piano plays about a 6-bar melody, and while the violin is totally silent, and the violin comes in playing the same melody in what seems like not the right key. It seems like we're playing in 2 different keys, and the piano is accompanying the violin, but with just notes rather than chords. And we like sort of weave back and forth who is playing this melody and who is accompanying, like very quickly. It's real interactive chamber music in that way. And there is some tension between the sounds, of course, but also there is some harmonic tension. It doesn't always sound like we're agreeing on what key to play in. And it makes, I think, the ending of the first movement like extremely satisfying. There's a long suspended note in the violin that goes on, that goes back and forth with when we're not resolving. And then the violin resolves, but the piano's still playing around, not quite found her way home yet until the very last note where we really arrive. So that's just, it's a real treat to put together and just to have that music in our heads. And the middle movement, what I mentioned about the blues is similar. It begins with the violin plucking chords just like in a 4-beat pattern, like you would hear maybe a banjo player play in one of these old timey bands. And then the piano comes in again on like, it sounds like the wrong note. But she's playing like a sort of slow blues. And I'm still plucking in the key that I started in. And we again go back and forth with someone playing these regular chords and someone like the other player sort of imitating a blues singer. But again, not always in the same key and in some really interesting harmonic language. And you'll see a lot, just from my perspective, a lot more pizzicato than I'm normally used to doing, including some like strum sort of pizzicato where you're going back and forth across all the strings, like how a banjo player would do. And so I asked her, we rehearsed it a while before the concert, and a few days before the concert we met, and I asked if we could take it easy on that movement because I didn't want to tear up my finger before the concert. And then the last movement, the piano recycles material from the first 2 movements because there's just so much great music in them. The piano brings a lot of that music back, but it is a perpetual motion for the violin. So we wind our way up over the first few bars, getting faster and faster and faster. And then the piano gets to go off and play quotes from the earlier movement. The violinist has me. I have just straight 16th notes for the entire movement. You don't stop 16th note. Once you hear me play my first set of full 16th notes, I do it for the whole rest of the movement. So we couldn't afford to do many takes of that one either because it is rather tiring. So hopefully the one we did turns out pretty well.
Well, I definitely have enjoyed hearing your passion and enthusiasm as you paint the picture of this work that Ravel composed. And now we're going to listen to you and Pauline weave together this intricate piece composed by Ravel. It is the Sonata number 2 for violin and piano. Ladies and gentlemen, that was pianist Pauline Martin and violinist Eliot Heaton performing Ravel's Sonata No. 2 for violin and piano. Eliot, thank you again for joining us for this second season of ProMusica Live here online. So glad to have you. Talk a little bit about the program that you have prepared for us.
So originally, when I was discussing with Pauline what we might play for this concert, we normally just start talking about a program like, what is music that we like, that we want to play? And that was how this one got started. But during COVID, I had gotten a little bit back into doing transcriptions of jazz solos, which is something that I was asked to. I studied jazz in graduate school. When I was in the undergraduate classes, I was not an advanced jazz technician by any means. But one thing that they had us do that I found really helpful was just by ear learning solos of jazz artists who we admired. And so I had done a few of those, and I had done the Preludium and Allegro that we're going to play later in the program was one of the transcriptions that I did. And I asked Pauline if she would be willing to do it. We had just hired a great pianist to transcribe the piano part for that. And she said, yeah, she would learn. Pauline said she would learn it. And so we said, well, we'll go well with this piece. Well, we've played Ravel Sonata a good amount together. And we have a lot of good little Kreisler pieces. So we were thinking, oh, why don't we do a program music that's influenced by jazz? And as we were putting it together, it was looking like a lot of the pieces, we were looking at the dates. The first piece we played was published in 1919. The Ravel, he finished it in 1927. This next piece, Syncopation, was published in 1925. And the Joe Venuti piece and the Eddie South arrangement were coming out of the same time period. So it turned from doing like a piece jazz program centered around Ravel Sonata to like a sort of 1920s celebration plus one extra piece at the end.
And you mentioned, Eliot, talking about how jazz influenced classical music. Now, many people say they are as far opposite as possible. I disagree. Some people, I just love jazz, I just love classical, and the twain shall never meet, but you're bringing them together. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, since the largest piece on the program is by Ravel, he was, of course, one of the great musicians of all time, and his take on jazz. He wrote an article actually that was published also in the 20s that was called "Take Jazz Seriously," and this was his advice to music lovers of the world. He said there's a long tradition. There's incredible performers. There's a great stylistic variety. And so I think that there, especially at the time that a lot of this music is coming from, the barriers between musical genres were maybe a little softer than they feel right now. And it was or my understanding is that it seemed more acceptable to cross those boundaries and just take something you like and bring it into your own style and present it to your own audience. And if it's good music, we like it, right? There's only really two kinds of music, like good music and bad music, right? So there's great classical music, there's great jazz music, and there are a lot of bad pieces in both of those genres as well. So that's kind of my understanding. It is just composers of classical music, which is what I am more familiar with, seem to have learned around this time that there are a lot of things to be learned from the growing genre of jazz. And so that's some of the music. All of the composers actually today that we're playing were willing to cross that barrier and bring things back in on their own terms. And so that's what Pauline and I both like to do also. So that's kind of how we see that.
Well, we are enjoying this mix, and without any more conversation, as I would love to talk to you, but I know that the audience would love to hear more of you and Pauline. So let's get into this work by Fritz Kreisler. It is Syncopation. Eliot Heaton and Pauline Martin performing Syncopation. Eliot, give us a little bit of backstory about what we just heard.
So my understanding of this piece is it's Fritz Kreisler's take on like ragtime, which you heard in a lot of the middle sections, but it's still like unmistakably music of Kreisler with this, especially in the opening and that kind of material. And this is a piece that I played extensively as a teenager, and I really didn't know why. I had a great teacher at the time, Linda Case, and why was she having me work on this? It didn't seem so hard, wasn't very virtuosic, but you know, I still have, as I said, the part that we worked with, and a lot of the things was just trying to get me to appreciate the nuances that are on almost every note of the piece. And I just now coming back to it as an adult, it's such a charming piece of music, and it's so worth to explore all of the little great moments in that short piece.
Well, we're glad that you decided to dust that piece off and bring it back. We do know that it's the details that are in the simple things and the little things that make such a huge difference. And sometimes we don't know it when we're younger. We don't have that maturity and that experience to bring to it, but the teacher plants that seed.
Yeah.
Seeing that potential that we have, and knowing that we're probably going to come back 10, 15, 20 years later and revisit that piece with a whole nother mind, a changed mind, a new mindset, experiences, and technique to contribute to the piece in a way that, of course, as a teenager, we weren't able to do at that time, but they knew just planting that seed would make the difference. I'd like to welcome everyone back to this second season of ProMusica Detroit Live. I am your host, Cecelia Sharpe, and just elated to be here again with you for a second season. You know that last season was completely different. We wanted to find a way to bring music to you into your home during a dark time and give musicians a platform to share their gifts with you. And we were able to do that. And of course, as I said, that season was different than any other season that ProMusica has done in the past. And guess what? This season is going to be a little bit different as well. We've got a little bit of this and a little bit of that. A little bit of this is the online webcast that you're watching now, and a little bit of that will be the fact that you'll be able to attend some of these concerts, like our upcoming concert, in person. And even if you're not able to attend in person, we've got you covered with the music online. So get ready for an incredible season 2 of ProMusica Detroit Live, whether it's in person, online, or both. We've got you covered this year. I've had the pleasure of talking with violinist Eliot Heaton and enjoying his performance with pianist Pauline Martin. It's just been absolutely phenomenal. And guess what? It is not over. I'm going to jump into talking to Eliot just a little bit more. And then, of course, what you're here for, we're going to get back into the music. So I know a little birdie told me that you're interested, that you were interested in jazz. Matter of fact, we talked about it. It's not even a birdie. That you're interested in jazz as a young person, and of course you're all over it now. What sparked your interest in jazz?
Well, actually, the school that I went to did not have an orchestra program, and so in fourth grade we all got the opportunity to choose a band instrument. And I had already been playing violin for a number of years by that time, so and I was doing that sort of on my own, taking private lessons and in the Suzuki school. But this was an opportunity to get together with more of my friends from school and play. So I chose the trombone. And I got pretty into the trombone for a while. And once we got into middle school, we had the opportunity to be in jazz band. And we had a great band director who had us doing, great big band pieces and teaching us like the basics of how to improvise over what chord, in a pretty simple way that we could do. And I was like, this is great. I never heard of this. This is not in any of the Suzuki books. And I really liked it. And I started, my family is all very musical, and we would always have music on when we were eating dinner or driving somewhere. And a lot of the time it was jazz, a lot of the time it was classical. So I kind of heard a lot of recordings and had the sound in my ear, and I was playing the jazz band. And when I got into high school, there's a certain time I was trying to figure out my own sort of musical voice. And I was like, well, I'm not as good at the trombone as I am at the violin. Why don't I just do this on the violin? So my good friend Jesse Collins and myself, he's a great artist and he's also a great musician. And we formed a little band that we called Reinhardt, which is my middle name, but it's also the last name, of course, of Django Reinhardt. And we would play a lot of the Grappelli, Django Reinhardt pieces and jazz standards. And we had a gig at like this local bar, and we played at a local coffee shop. So that was we didn't really know what we were doing, but we knew we liked the music, and that it felt good to play. And I think that was as valuable as anything else that I could have done as musical training at that time. When I went to Indiana University for graduate school, they have, of course, a great jazz program there. And the legendary David Baker was there for a long time, and I was there at the tail end of his career. And he, of course, was great at bridging the gap between string departments and jazz departments. And so it was like, when I was at Oberlin, I would try to get into jazz classes, and it was a little bit like, do you really know what you're doing? But at Indiana, they're like, yeah, you come in with the freshmen, you know, you can do jazz ear training, improvisation class, take a lesson with a graduate student every week. So it kind of rekindled my interest in it after I got a little bit more narrowly focused on just learning how to play the violin well when I was in my undergraduate studies. And then during COVID, I was like, oh, I might as well get back into this. You know, I transcribed some Clifford Brown solos and some this Eddie South solo that we're going to play later. So that's kind of how it all got started.
That is a fantastic story. Once again, a seed planted by your instructors way back in elementary school, and just watering it and letting it grow, and like you said, finding music that you love and that you relate to, and just and taking that chance to go ahead and tackle it. You didn't know what you were doing, but like you said, it felt good. It was what you loved to do. You had a friend who was supportive, and so your middle name is Reinhardt, and then Django Reinhardt. It's just a perfect combination. You were destined to do it.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. We're going to go ahead and shift gears and get into some of that jazz music that Eliot loves so much. Eliot, go ahead and set up this next piece.
So this is actually a pre-existing arrangement of a piece by the great Joe Venuti, who is considered sort of the father of the jazz violin. And he was classically trained in Philadelphia. And when he was growing up, sort of similar to me, actually, he had a good friend who played the guitar, Eddie Lang, and they got really into jazz. And he said Joe Venuti was noticing that the competition for classical violin was very tight, and there were a lot of great players in that area at that time. And he said, if I go into jazz, no one plays jazz violin. If I just do it, I'll be the best person doing it. So he and his friend Eddie Lang made a lot of just terrific recordings together. And this was one of their signature pieces. You can hear sort of in the music, this guy had a really, really legendary and almost unpleasant, but still really funny sense of humor. He was a great practical joker. You can hear this in the music. It's like sort of funny in an over-the-top way. And there are a lot of really memorable pranks that he pulled. Two that come to mind. He once, during a break, filled a tuba player's tuba with flour. And so the flour exploded everywhere. And one that was a little less nice, I don't know, he must have had something against tuba players. This one is very famous. He called, I think it was 26 tuba players, and referred them all to the same gig in Hollywood at this street corner. And then there was no gig there. And he wanted to see what would happen when all of these tuba players showed up. Luckily, they were all union players, and he did end up having to pay them all for their time. But it's quite a thing to imagine. But so Joe Venuti, father of the jazz violin, this is one of his pieces that he played with Eddie Lang that we're playing a transcription of.
The joke was on him, but we're not kidding around this time. We're going to get right to it with Joe Venuti's Going Places.
Tito was already doing it on his own before we put a name on Love Tito's.
He used to give it away, which of course included charitable events.
Tito allows each of the employees to choose what charity in their local community they want to give back to.
I think that's the end goal, to do something that has meaning and purpose.
We're here in this company to make the world a better place, and we like to think we're doing it through Tito's handmade vodka.
We are swinging along, cooking things up, and obviously going places with Joe Venuti's work entitled Going Places, performed by Eliot Heaton and Pauline Martin. Eliot, while you were performing and I was enjoying that performance, I was thinking about something that you said about Joe Venuti, and that was he realized he needed to set himself apart from all the other violinists. Classical music being in the orchestra was really popular, and it was basically an oversaturated market at that time. And he knew, okay, if there's one that's great, there's 12 more where that came from. What can I do? What a really smart guy to just move forward with something that's different, that sets yourself apart. And Eliot, you definitely did that as a kid in high school, working with your friend on and building and growing and finding your niche as a musician as well.
Yeah, I think that we're all the most convincing as musicians, and probably in other areas that I'm not as familiar with, but we're most convincing, I think, when we do something that we really believe in, right? It's not like someone told me to go and play this piece or that piece. It's like, this is something that I like the sound of, I want to share it with the audience. And then I think when I hear a performance like that, where I'm like, this person, this is their music, then no matter if they're playing well or playing poorly, you're kind of on board with that. It's very much more engaging than if it's seems just done for no reason, or done sort of not out of your own desire. I think it's really valuable, and as a teacher, and as also for myself as a performer, to just always be balancing the how of, how am I going to play in tune? How am I going to execute all these passages? And with the why of the music, of why am I asking people to sit down and spend their time listening to this? What is the specific idea of this music that I'm hoping to share? And like I said, my teacher in Oberlin, Marilyn McDonald, was just one of the best, I think, ever of finding how to make you notice the why of, all of her students played very well, but not all the same. Everyone had very different sounds, and I think it's because she was able to find what specifically about you was kind of activated by the music that you were playing, and how could you really lean into that and try to draw out as much of your own interpretation of the piece as possible. So I do still take lessons with her from time to time when I feel like I've lost some direction in my practice.
That is very humble of you to know and acknowledge that I have to go back to my roots sometimes, no matter how much I've accomplished.
Yeah, I love taking violin lessons. You take the lesson every week for the first 24 years of your life, and then all of a sudden you're not supposed to take lessons anymore. Like, that's crazy. So I take lessons whenever I can. If I hear someone I like, I say, ask them, how are you doing that vibrato, or what are you thinking about when you're playing that piece? Or can you listen to me play this and give me some feedback? Probably I asked my wife to do this, more than she would like, but I just think it's really interesting. We all think in such different ways about music, but and I think that's why we have so many great and different sounding performers in the world. This is making me think of the next piece on the program, this sort of teasing out the individual spirit of your own music. And so it may be confusing the way it's listed in the program. So let me just give a little bit of background about the next piece we're going to do. There's almost too much good information about it.
Well, let's have it.
We talked about Joe Venuti, who had a great sense of humor. Fritz Kreisler also was a pretty funny guy. I think there's something about violin playing that makes you want to just have a little bit of mischief or humor in your day-to-day life. But Kreisler actually published a lot of his works under the names of other older composers. And this was so that people would take his music seriously, and they wouldn't review it as modern music. They would review it as like Vivaldi or Pugnani or whoever he chose to write as. And then sort of when he was very well established in his career, he came out and said, all of these pieces, I wrote all of these pieces. And so the piece Preludium and Allegro that's next on the program, he actually published under the name Pugnani, who allegedly was, I guess, was a 18th century Italian composer. I don't know anything that he wrote, but this was Kreisler's sort of pen name for this kind of music. So Eddie South, I'm now transitioning more into what we are going to do. Eddie South was just a terrific violinist. I spent a lot of time learning this version of Preludium and Allegro with the YouTube recording. And I was having it slowed down and trying to play along and figure out what rhythm he was using, what fingering or bowing is he using. And that just gave me an immense amount of respect for his playing, because he's a masterful technical player, but he's doing it all in this style that is really his own. So Eddie South was born in Louisiana, and compared to Joe Venuti, who is more like what we would think of as a standard jazz player, Eddie South did more, he did some jazz playing. He was a very good jazz violinist, but he did a lot of like sort of popular music in his own style, or he would play iconic classical pieces. He has a great swing version of Paganini's 24th Caprice, and also this Preludium and Allegro that again is iconic in the violin repertoire, but not like this. He's the only one who played it like this until I like laboriously copied out every note that he did and tried to copy him. But I just love the way he plays. And so this was his version that I heard on YouTube. And I was like, what is this? So it was during COVID, so I didn't have a lot else to do. So I wrote it all out, the violin part. And I asked Catherine McMichael to transcribe the piano part, and she's a very good pianist and was able to do the transcription. And so Pauline and I are going to play Eddie South's version of Fritz Kreisler's imitation Pugnani piece, Preludium and Allegro.
Take it away. Oh my gosh. Preludium and Allegro like you have never heard it before, performed by Eliot Heaton and Pauline Martin. That version was arranged by Eddie South. Now, Eliot, I was not ready for that. That was swinging.
Yeah, I mean, it's you still get the essence of the piece. I think you can. It's familiar, reminiscent of something Kreisler might have done if he was more into jazz.
Absolutely magnificent. You always can put a different spin on it, and he, as we talked about, found his own niche, just like Joe Venuti. Eddie South did the same, and it was just absolutely incredible. So, Eliot, we have come to the end of the program. We only have one piece left. You have so much on your plate. What's next for you?
Well, we have a very exciting season at Michigan Opera Theater, and we've been doing some really great projects, and so we've got a full season of that coming up. I'm also playing a great season with the Des Moines Metro Opera coming up in the summer, and in between then I will be playing the Cacciatorian Concerto. I'm just thinking in terms of like, what do I need to be practicing right now? So the next thing I need to be practicing, like after this interview is over, is the Cacciatorian Concerto, which I'm playing with the Saginaw Bay Symphony in January.
Wow. Well, once again, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to share with us here at ProMusica Detroit Live. We really appreciate you being here with us. I'm excited about this next piece. It's one of my favorites. Go ahead, let the audience know exactly what it is.
So we're going to be playing Oblivion by Astor Piazzolla, and this is a piece that doesn't really fit with our 1920s jazz aesthetic as exactly as everything else did. But I think Piazzolla was also one of these composers who was able to hear the music around him and put it into his own music in a way that really seemed like his own, but also very authentic to the world that he was coming from. So this piece he wrote for the Italian movie Henry IV. And it's a kind of bizarre plot of this movie. There's a actor historian who is in this historical pageant, and he suffers a fall. And when he regains consciousness, he has taken on the persona of the character who he was portraying, which is Henry IV, the Holy Roman Emperor. And he ends up in a sort of psychiatric situation, but at a medieval castle where it's not, they're sort of trying to see, like, is he really in this character? Is he trying to get attention? What exactly is going on here? And this music, I think, is sort of evocative of, like, we don't know what is happening. It's a little bit upsetting, but it's also a little bit unreal. And Pauline plays this kind of music really well, and we've played this piece on a number of our programs. And we thought, since we had so much sort of up tempo, some swing, a lot of just like positive, very exuberant emotions, we thought this would bring some nice balance to play this at the end of the program. And I think it was also sort of appropriate to the times that we're in right now, and especially this last year that we all went through, especially us, especially as musicians, just sitting around, is there going to be the avenue to do what we did anymore? Are there going to be concerts again? Is this what's going to happen next? So this is Oblivion by Astor Piazzolla.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it from the man himself, Eliot Heaton. It's Pauline Martin, Eliot Heaton, closing out this episode of ProMusica Detroit Live with Piazzolla's Oblivion. closing out this episode of ProMusica Detroit Live with Astor Piazzolla's Oblivion. You can't go wrong with Piazzolla in any concert.
No matter what else you play on the concert, if you play a Piazzolla encore, I think that will be what you have the most conversations about after the concert. And I think just really speaks to how universal his musical language is. Even though it's very specific to his own culture, it's something that we can all recognize as very authentic.
Well, Eliot, I'd like to thank you for coming to ProMusica Detroit Live. This was an incredible start to our season. Thank you for sharing your time and talent with us, and we welcome you back in the future.
Thanks. It was a real honor to play on this series, and it's a great opportunity for both of us to do. So thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up this episode of ProMusica Detroit Live. Tune in next time in person for our concert in January. Thanks again, and thank you to all of our sponsors, and of course to Steinway Gallery. I'm Cecelia Sharpe. Until next time, see ya.
It's sort of his second sonata, but the first one was more of a student work published posthumously. We can cut that out. I don't know how to say that word.
Cut that part out, guys. He doesn't want to say posthumously or posthumously.
Yeah.
After he died.